I've been asked a few times now to help people with running backing tracks on the Roland SPD-SX. So I figured the best way of doing it, to explain it, would be to create a video and show you exactly how I'd go about doing it. Now, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the use of one pad. I'm going to hit the one pad. I'm going to get a click track to my earphones, headpiece, and I'm going to get front of house. I'm going to get the backing track that I choose. So I'm going to just go through exactly step by step how I do that, how I set it up on the SPDSX, and hopefully how some of you guys can do the same. So first thing we need to do is create the backing track. Now sometimes you can go online and buy a backing track. I'm going to assume that you're using your own backing tracks. So what I've got here, I'm running Logic here, but this could be Cubase, it could be Pro Tools, or whatever DAW you want to use. So in here what I've got is I've got the separate stems, all the separate files of this track called Be My God. Now this band is a band that I play in called Quantum. It's electronica, so it's kind of a cross between drum and bass and dance music and rock, all kind of put together. But what it means, because of that genre, there's lots of sub hits in there, there's lots of samples and just crazy kind of noises that we don't make live. So rather than have 8 musicians on the stage all just doing different samples and triggering and things like that, it's all running straight off the backing track. So what I've got on here, I've got about 8, 9, maybe up to about 12 tracks running. I'll show you them now. The sort of thing I've got is something along the lines of sort of this, whatever this is. And then the full track is the idea of the sort of thing that's going on in this song. So that's pretty simple for most people to create. If you're playing a band and you've recorded an album, you get your stems from the producer who's done the album. You cut out the ones that you're obviously going to play live, so your bass, your guitar, whatever you've got live on stage, and you put the rest of them into your backing track. And that's exactly what I've done here. Well, once we've got that, the next thing we need to do is create the most important bit, which is the click track. The way I create the click tracks in here is I use MIDI, and I'm triggering something called UltraBeat, which is basically something that just fires samples. Now I've created the samples that I like to hear, and the things that I like to play to is kind of a beep and a tambourine, and I'll show you that now. So if I open UltraBeat up, I've loaded my samples up here. They're not coming out because it's muted. Let me just unmute that. So these are the noises that I kind of hear. So kind of electronic clave sound with a tambourine. That tends to, for me, just softens the sound a little bit, makes it a bit more of a groove to play to rather than a dit, 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 dit. And I've got 2 of those. I've got kind of one that's a slightly higher one and a slightly lower one, and I've got a kind of horrible whistle, which I'll explain in a moment. So this can be anything you want. You like sticks, stick sounds, you can use that. You like that sound, you use that. Use whatever you want. Okay. Now all you do is you create a MIDI track. You have it trigger whatever you want. You could be your sounds on a Roland module. It could be your sounds on anything that you want. Right? You make that trigger those sounds. For me, as I just showed you, it's those. Now what I've done is I've created this little track here, and I've got a 1, 2, 3, 4, and I literally just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So my 1's accented quite significantly. My 2's a little bit lower. My 3's kind of medium, and my 4's back down again. And I get this. Right, real simple. So I create that track, the full length. I can put in there what we call cheaters. So if I want, I can plug a microphone, I can talk to myself, I can say, don't forget to stop in the chorus, I can count myself if there's an ending or something, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm the only person that's going to hear this track, so you can say whatever you want into there, okay? For the counting, I like to have 2 slow ones followed by 4 quick ones. Now the reason for that is the 2 slow ones give me the reference, 1, 2, and then I can count the rest of the band in for 1, 2, 3, 4. So I think this will play it. Let's go back a little bit further. I didn't quite catch that. So 1, 2, and I go 1, 2, 3, 4. And everyone comes in there. At the end of the track, the one downside of using backing tracks is you have to be very rigid in your layout. You can't add another chorus in for no reason. You can't accidentally go over 2 bars in a bridge or something like that. So because those things do still happen in bands, I just want a bit of a safety blanket. So what I want to know is when we get to the end of the song, I want to make sure that we're all going to end at the same time. And when I say we, I mean the track as well. If there's loads of sub going and all of a sudden that stops because we've gone over by 2 bars, it sounds pretty stupid. So at the end of my tracks, I just have that horrible whistle as a bit of a warning. This is the last bar. So if I hit that for you. And that'll be the ending for me. So that's it for me in that track. I haven't got any talking or anything like that I can show you, but as I mentioned, you can have that. Right, at this point, I've got a track. I've got a click track. I need to export them. So let's start with the click track, seeing as that's soloed. I export them at the highest level I can get them to without them clipping. I find it easier to get the volume at this stage on the door to really push that level and put it on the SPDSX pretty loud, let's call it, and then I can adjust it down on there rather than the other way around. So what I do on this, on Logic they call it bounce. You could be export on whatever you're using, but on this one it's bounce. This is the only key bit to this. It wants to be a WAV file, and this is the bit that you've got to get right. It wants to be 16-bit. So some of these software programs will try and export them at 24-bit or 8-bit or whatever bit, all right? It's got to be 16-bit for the SPDSX to understand it. If it's a 24-bit, it won't work. I run the sample rate at 44,000. Most of this other stuff won't make a difference, all right? So I do it interleaved and did the ring note. However, right, so let's just call this click track demo. I'll call this one, okay? And I literally bounce the selected amount. Now I've already done that, so I won't have to do that. One last thing I will quickly show you that I did forget to do, which was lucky, but on most of these programs you've got to select exactly how the length of the stuff you want to export. So on this here, I've got to make sure that I export exactly the same start position for the click track as the backing track, otherwise they go out of sync. So that's that one done. The next thing I do is I then solo the track. So in this case, I'll just mute the click and I'll solo the track and I'll export that. Now at this point on my desktop, I get 2 files. Be My God track, and let's get rid of that one, that's an old one, and Be My God click. And obviously check these before you put them on your pad, so I'll spacebar that. There's my click track, I'll just check this one. And they work fine. So at this point, the 2 tracks, WAV files, 16-bit, they're both ready to go onto my SPDSX. So we'll move over to that right now. Okay, so next stage is to start to get these files onto the SPDSX. So I'm going to quickly plug in the USB from the MacBook into the back of the SPDSX. And it comes up saying computer's connected on my SPDSX. All the lights come up like a Christmas tree and we're all good. So I'm going to quickly go back to the MacBook. I'm going to open up the SPDSX Wave Manager. And using the Wave Manager, I'm going to copy across the 2 files to 2 of the pads. So if we just talk about what we're going to do here, pad 3 on the SPDSX up here, I like to hit that as my start and stop pad. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign the song to this pad, and then one of the foot pedals, which is not actually connected, I'm going to make the click track go onto it, and I'm going to connect the 2 together. So when I hit this one, both of them are going to start. I'm then going to assign it so it just comes out of my headphones, at front of house, and all that kind of stuff. So let's get started. So first of all, on the computer, I find an empty track. So let's go to 48 on here. You can see that some stuff's already been assigned, but that's not going to affect us. So let's just clear that one. So I go over, right? I've got my Be My God click track and I've got my Be My God track. So I'll bring the track and I'll drop it onto that pad there. So it's been assigned to this pad up here. A couple of seconds for that to load onto the module. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load the click track down to my footswitch 1. So I'm going to drag that one and drop it down here. I can call it whatever I want to call it, so Be My God would make sense, right? But I'm going to delete this one after this because I've already done this. So give it a name. These will obviously all be empty on yours, and we'll we'll exit out of that. Okay, so it's happy. I can now unplug it. So at this point, I've got my 2 tracks on my SPDSX, but I want to start assigning them and doing things on here. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to press menu, I'm going to go up to the pad, and I'm going to press enter. Now, the way the SPDSX works is if I hit a pad, it will skip to that pad. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the 3rd pad. I'm going to go into the menu, I'm going to go into there, and I'm going to check that it's been assigned. That's all signed fine. The volume at the moment, this one's already been set at some point, so it's 75, and you can see that it's pan center, and these other settings are all off. Now I'm going to go into mode here, and in the mode screen, this is the part I want to change. So at the moment, it's set to a single track. I need to change that. So I'm going to put it up to be a phrase. If it was a single track, every time I hit it, the backing track's going to start again and again and again. No, I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that to be a phrase, meaning that it's going to start and then stop. Now, sub's not assigned because I don't want anything assigned in there. Right, so if I go back to, in fact, I'll stay in there. What I'll do this time is instead of going to this pad here, I'm going to go all the way across by pressing this right button over here, past the pads, and I'm going to go all the way to, I get to my 2 foot switches. And I'm going to go to the left foot switch, and in here, where I assigned Be My Godlet, I'm going to go into the mode again, and I'm going to change that one to phrase as well now. Just by luck, that one's already set to phrase. So my click is now set to a phrase, and my pad is now set to a phrase. Now at the moment, as you saw, the volumes, I don't know whether they're going to be right or wrong. That'll be a trial and error in a moment. The next thing I've got to do is I've got to get them to trigger together. Now to do this, what you do is you go into kit, and here, where it says pad link, these will be switched off. So that's set from a previous session. So these 2 here will stay off, and you need to go and tell it that you want to link these 2 pads together. In other words, when you hit one pad, the other one's also going to go. So for me, it was pad number 3, and I go all the way to the end and come back 1, it was FS1. So this is now telling me that when I hit pad 3, FS1 is also going to trigger. In other words, when I start my backing track, the click track's also going to start. Kit tempo, we don't need to worry about here, but you may set that to the speed of the song. Now outputs, this is going to be very important, all right? So FS1, in other words, my backing track, my click track, I should say, sorry, let's say that again. FS1, which is my click track, I don't want that going front of house, so I want it to go to my headphones only. So using the left and the right button here, I can change it from master to just headphones. Now then I can go back to pad 3, and I can leave that one, I can set that one to my master out and my headphones. Now there's also the option of setting it to the sub out. Now on the back of this module, there's 4 outputs. I've got left and right of the main outputs, but I've got left and right of the sub outputs. So in theory, I can have 4 separate things coming out of this pad. So I might have the track coming out of this one, maybe my triggers from my drum kit coming out of this one, maybe these pads up here coming out of that one, and so on. What I do most of the time is I actually use the sub out for my backing track. Now the reason for doing that is that then if I accidentally mess around with these dials over here, i.e. my master gets completely changed, it's not changing my volume of my backing track. That's going to be set if I stay on the sub out. Now I'll show you that on the back in a moment, but if you get to gigs and you are your own sound engineer, then you probably want to set it to master, because then you can come over here and change the volume yourself. But just be aware that when you turn this master volume, if you're using triggers or if you're also using these pads here, it's going to be changing that volume also. So let's go through that again. So my pads, oh come on, my pads are in kit and I've linked them. On my outputs, for pad number 3, it's coming out of my sub out, and for FS1, it's headphones only. Okay, so next thing is to try it. I'll quickly plug this in so we can actually hear something. Okay, so I've got a couple of speakers plugged in here so that you can hear both the headphone output and the main output, so the sub output on the back of the module. So when I go to hit this pad here, you'll see that this light here also went off, and you can hear the click obviously going. So if I change my master over here, nothing's happening. all you can hear is the backing track and the click track. Now, what I would then do is independently go through and edit the volumes of those up and down. Now that's something that I need to do with the band really to get that volume set so they're all similar. But if I set that to 85 and I go all the way down to my click track, which obviously only I can hear in my headphones, I set the volume of that. So to quickly show you then the back of the module where I've got the outputs, if I show you this briefly, on the back of here, look, what I would have, I've got a few different outputs here. So what I would do is I'd take my sub out, which is this guy here. In this case, I've taken the left output because that's why I set it to mono, off to the desk. So that will go to front of house. And this headphone here will go straight to my headphones, obviously. I'll get the click track. These guys will get the backing track, and everyone's happy. Now, I also get the backing track through to my headphones, which is a bit of a bonus. So what I would then do from the desk, if I couldn't hear the other guys very well, I'd get an input sent back to me from the desk, like a mix like you'd get into your stage wedge, your stage monitor. I'd plug it into here. And I got a bit of control on this gain switch, but ideally you would have it set to line if it's coming from a desk rather than mic. But what I tend to find at gigs is sometimes this takes so long for them to figure out their level sent to me that I just get them to send me something and I can adjust it a little bit on here without damaging it too much. And I've also got some settings on the module which I can use to change that level in. I'll quickly show you that now. So this is just for my in-ears, okay? This is not anything else. So I go menu, I go to setup, or is it system? No, system. And then I go down to audio in and out. And you can see here that I've got my volume control. And mine set pretty low, that's 29. So the last gig that I did, obviously I had quite a strong signal coming from the desk back to me. So I turned that right the way down to 29. Now, I need to mix that in with the level of my click track. So in other words, if my click track's at this volume, beep, 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 I don't want guitars way louder. I've got to slowly bring that down. So I use, my click track won't change. I use this one to change that. Now, the only other thing that you've got to try and do then, actually, I'll quickly explain one last thing, what the hell this is, system gain. So this is across the board. This is everything that comes out of this module is adding 12 decibels to. Now, that's something that will change gig to gig. For me, the desk that I use this most often with, I need to add a bit of leg room, so I tend to add about 12 decibels on. Now you've only got a choice of 12, 6 or 0. And that's just about that. The final thing I'd want to do is take this to a band rehearsal before taking it out live. Before going to the band rehearsal, the only other thing I'd do normally is I'd put my headphones in, I'd run each of the tracks, and I would set the click track level so that it's the same in every track, and I do the same with the backing tracks. Then when I get to the rehearsal, we'd go through each track individually, and then I'd say, someone would stand out front and say, right, that track needs to be louder, that one needs to be quieter, and so on. On the module, the way I program my tracks is that every kit, so there's 100 kits on this SPD-SX, each of the kits I'd have allocated to a different track. So one would be called Be My God, the next one would be called Hold My Fire, and so on. So at the end of every song, I flick to the next track, and I start that track. Now, for me, it's been a perfect solution for many gigs. If I'm going on tour and I've got a sound engineer coming out on tour with me, and he knows our show very well, he's got the ability to have all of my individual tracks sent to him and change those throughout the set. So he might want a separate bass track, a separate synth track, a separate piano track, and all that, because he's gonna change those depending on what PA he's using. Now, for that kind of situation, this isn't the tool to use. The maximum amount of outputs I can get from this is 4. Now, even within those 4, really there's 2 which are easy to use. Okay, the other 4 mean that you've got to pan things right and left. But for the majority of things that I've done, most of the gigs, this has been absolutely fine. The only things that I'd sort of say to maybe watch out for, first one is the on-off switch. So when I don't mean the power, I mean literally the start and stopping of the pad. So when you hit that pad 3 in my case, and I start the track, if some guitarist decides to come over and accidentally knocks the end of his guitar on that pad, it goes off and that track is instantly stopped. I've had sticks where I've gone to hit a cymbal, it's come off flying off the cymbal, or it's snapped, and it's hit it and stopped it. So you've just got to be a bit careful of which pad you use. You can always use a foot pad instead if you prefer that. For me, I'm too clumsy on my feet, and I'd probably switch that off and off, on and off, even more likely than I would with my hands. So I like to have the ability to be able to hit it, see it start, or if it does go wrong, I can hit it and stop that track. Now, the only other thing that I want to warn you about is the power on-off on this module. If you're at a gig and you're doing a sound check, for instance, and for whatever reason one of your tracks needs turning up by another 10 decibels, so you turn it up and everyone's happy, and then between you sound checking and you go on the gig, someone just pulls the plug out, it forgets all of those settings that you've done. Now, it won't forget the settings if you press the power button on the front of the module. So what I tend to do is every time I make a change at a gig, I'll press the power button, switch it off, switch it back on, and then those changes are obviously saved. Let me know how you get on. Hopefully this video is of some use to you. If you want to put things in the comments section, any questions or maybe any experiences you've had, and maybe you can help some other people, that would be great. And hopefully I'll see you again soon with some more videos. Thanks. Here's a quick example of this in action. So the SPDSX being used. Come on! Come on! Get on your knees and be my God. I can't